Over 75% of Jewish students in the United States have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitic or anti-Israel acts, and the situation isn't getting any better. Joining us in the studio today is Aviva Slomich, the International Campus Director of the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting in America. Aviva is responsible for assisting college students address Israel-related hostility. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Natasha.
So the school year just started and thousands of Jewish students will be going to campus for the first time. What should they be expecting?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that question because at one point, as you said, that we've seen an increase in anti-Semitic attacks and anti-Israel hostility on campuses. We've also seen an increase in pro-Israel activity on campuses. But what we saw just a few weeks ago, a couple of articles were published by students from very prestigious universities in Canada, at McGill University, and at Brown University, an Ivy League in America, addressing these exact concerns, warning students, Zionist activists specifically, that they will come across abuse, targeting, intimidation because of their the beliefs that they hold for Israel, and that they're warning them. They're also, pushing them up and empowering them to continue to support Israel and to support their rights as a Jewish people. But I find it very interesting that not, from really prestigious universities, these warnings these students are experiencing these serious issues.
So, there's a long debate about the line between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. From your experience, does this line exist? And if so, is it changing?
From our experience, absolutely, it is changing. There was, people could argue that there was a line that existed between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. There was a point where the extreme anti-Israel activists, such as Students for Justice in Palestine, seemed as though they were only targeting Israeli supporters, and were only targeting Israel as a country. Now, in that itself, you could argue is anti-Semitism because some of their concerns were right of return for Jewish people for Israel, and they weren't concerned about this where the same right occurs in other countries in Europe, for instance. So that in itself can be anti-Semitism because it's attacking the only Jewish state for something that it is neglectfully challenging other countries for. However, we saw in about spring 2014, the University of Michigan, where anti-Israel rhetoric and propaganda really crossed the line to anti-Semitism. In the spring of 2014 with Michigan, there was a BDS petition. It did not pass. And SAFE, the very extremist anti-Israel organization on the campus, had riots and protests outside the student government and student unions. And while they're chanting, and also their harassment of student government members who decide to not vote for the BDS petition, they're referring to them as dirty Jews and kikes. So, and this clearly has nothing to do with Israel. And then from then on, we saw in the fall of 2015, spring of 2015, where Jewish students who are running for student government positions at UCLA, at UC Santa Cruz, were at Stanford, were specifically asked how their Jewish identity would impact their vote on BDS. Nothing about Israel. They didn't know if they supported the country or not, their Jewish identity.
So it's interesting what you say, because I myself went to a college in the United States, and I had a lot of struggles with my Jewish identity and how that related to supporting Israel. Groups like Students for Justice on Palestine made me question, can I be pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian and pro-peace at the same time, or are those all separate things that don't coincide with one another? What's your opinion on that?
To be honest, if you ask probably the most average Israeli activists, they are pro-Israel, they are pro-Palestinian, they are pro-peace. They are here to support Israel as a country because they support the ideas, they feel connected, they have family there, they feel that this is a home for them. But they also support it for a number of other reasons, including its liberal values and democracy. And they want to, find a solution to the conflict. They don't want to see the Palestinians as enemies. I mean, we bring speakers to campus, such as Basamid. He's a Palestinian activist. He speaks out because he is against the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. He sees this as something that is hurtful and detrimental to the Palestinian people. And he wants to see peace come to the land. On contrast, Students for Justice in Palestine and their allies, we have yet to come across an actual organization that is run by students that has a Palestinian name in it, that's actually pro-Palestinian and not just anti-Israel. Them, spilling out these or disseminating this false image of Israel as an apartheid state, despite the polls showing that Palestinians would even rather live in Israel. Even their Palestinian country is created because of the rights and benefits they receive in the country. They're ignoring this. They don't care. I mean, they're just here. They want to see, they really want to see Israel destroyed. And there's two different lengths.
Absolutely.
But the supporters of BDS, Omar Barghouti, those who are really behind that movement, and many of the SJP and groups on campus are, the primary goal is for Israel not to exist as a Jewish state. The Palestinians and everyone else, who will get left, and what happens if, God forbid, that were to occur, it's not a concern.
Yeah, I think before I went to college, I always believed that you could be both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian, and then I was confronted in a lot of situations where being pro-Israel meant I was cornered and I wasn't allowed to be pro-Palestinian. But to be pro-peace, you have to be able to understand both sides of this issue, which is something that I think often gets lost in, college, campus dialogue, unfortunately. So, do you think that there's a double standard when it comes to addressing discrimination against Jewish students on campuses versus discrimination against, minority groups on campuses?
I think there's definitely a double standard. There's an issue, and especially in the U.S. right now, Jews are not seen so much as a minority anymore. They're seen as white privilege. There's this one student, I believe he went to Princeton University, he wrote an excellent article all about his white privilege. He was a Jewish student. He spoke about his family surviving the Holocaust and coming to America and having to start all over, and all kinds of different experiences that he went through. Sarcastically, this is his white privilege. In addition to that, the New York Times just published an article about how universities all over, especially in the U.S., but I've seen it elsewhere in Europe as well, are almost coddling college students, making them so like you said, overly sensitive, making sure that they feel completely comfortable and careful, and they don't have to go to certain classes or hear certain speakers if they have their opinion might hurt them, which sounds a little too much to me. It's the whole point of college. But one of the campuses they highlighted was Clark University, which is a small liberal arts school in Worcester, Massachusetts. Why I bring this up? Well, last year, this same university had a very big event on campus. All the students and administration and professors were there to speak about racism. And students were permitted to each share their experiences. Obviously, not everyone. It's a large crowd of people, but some people could raise their hand and share their experiences about different examples of racism that they've had against them, or racist attacks. And one student, she wasn't there, she had submitted something, and a professor had read it for her because she wasn't able to attend. She said, I'm a Jewish student, and I feel uncomfortable on campus. I feel like I've had an anti-Semitic, I've come across anti-Semitic attacks. I've had people, say things that are on the line of anti-Semitism towards me because I support Israel, and so on. So as soon as she said that, the crowd started booing. And this is supposed to be like a place, a safe space, as they sometimes refer to them now, as a place for anyone to talk and address their concerns. They started booing this woman. Professor said nothing, and then someone else stood up and talked about how they were from Gaza and what's happened to her family because of Israel, which is a horrible country, and so on. And she got applause. She was applauded for what she said. Professors, no one said anything. Administration didn't say anything. Moving forward, one of our students on the campus ended up writing an article about it and getting it published in a Boston Jewish paper, so it got some news, and it was exposed. So the administration eventually had to have some sit-downs, but it's absurd. It's a perfect example of showing you that basically everybody is safe except for Jews and Zionists. They're kind of fair game.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. So now, how is C.A.M.E.R.A supporting students in dealing with these situations?
Well, thank you for that question. I'd be gladly tell you what we've been doing. C.A.M.E.R.A is an apolitical organization, and we were founded in 1982. Its primary goal is to ensure that the media is accurately portraying Israel, and we've grown so that we've reached farther than the U.S. now. We're also we have a department, Revista de Medio Oriente, that follows the Spanish media. UK Media Watch, BBC Watch follows the English media. We also have Perspectiva, right, in Israel, which follows both the media in Hebrew and in English. But we've been working on campuses, as early as the 90s. We had a C.A.M.E.R.A on Campus magazine that we would put out, publish works from students and professors and researchers of our own, kind of documenting the issues that we were seeing on campus. And then around 2005, we started programs where we had actual student representatives on campus. And in 2011, we started a program where we help students create pro-Israel organizations on campus. So what we're doing is that we're helping to ensure students that they're confident, that they know that they're on the right side of history, that they have the facts on their side, that they should feel proud, just like any other people would, to be on campus, to have a club, and to educate others. And we're there definitely a lot as mentors and to give moral support, but we also have our whole team of researchers that are, giving them, you hear there's Jewish-only roads, well, here's a video that we took in Israel showing that nothing like that exists, and really being able to get right down to the lies and correct them.
Provide the facts so that
exactly.
people can feel strong and steadfast in their identity, right?
Right. And we, just this last summer, we had our largest conference yet. About 84 students came from over nearly 70 universities, US, Canada, England, Scotland, and Israel. So we started working with Israeli students too, which is very exciting because here in Israel, they follow it, but it's a lot different to follow it than to actually meet the students outside of Israel who are standing up for their country. So it was wonderful. They got to meet, and all meet in Boston, and they learned various ranges from how to reach liberal students on campus, hearing from their own peers from various campuses, to op-ed writing, to how to stand up and debate and present your case. So it was a very exciting 4-day conference for us.
Well, I'm sure that I could have used that type of support when I was in college myself. Thank you so much for coming in, Aviva.
Thank you so much for having me.